Hello, and welcome to the Bite-Sized Theology Podcast Extended Edition, episode 33. Coming to you from three fellas who are well-versed in the art of tomfoolery and don't have much else going for them. It is Thursday, the 11th of June. I'm your host, Aaron Lively. Joining me this week is Sage Blaylock.
How's it going, everybody?
And John McCord.
Hello, everyone. I can't think of a witty retort for tomfoolery. I've just been making puns in my head, but none of them good.
I prefer Jim foolery. How's that?
Jim foolery.
Hashtag Jim foolery.
There's some identity theft going on here.
Right.
I don't like that.
I don't know. I'm Irish, so I'll prefer shenanigans.
I'm down for a Donnybrook.
Oh man. All right. Well, here we go. You guys know what time it is. It is time for your quarantine ranking.
You all know what time it is.
Yeah, we've all lost track. So on a scale of 1 to 10, this is very simple. Just how's it going? How's it going? Good, terrible. Those aren't numbers, but I would like that in number value, please.
Well, I believe I was somewhere along the lines of an 8.75 last time. So I think because it's hot now and I feel like I'm sweating all the time, no matter what, I'm going to go an 8.35867.
Is that higher or lower than the last one you did?
Lower.
I can't even tell.
So 8.75 is more than 8.3678.
Yeah, I mean, once you get so many decimal places, I just can't even tell what you're saying anymore.
Well, the important thing is to look at the tenths place. So
okay.
8.3 is less than 8.7.
I know how decimals work. There's just a lot of them, you know? It's unconventional.
Yeah,
I hate it.
It's a weird way to do your ranking, that's for sure.
Well, I've always been an unconventional person, so.
You got that right. John, how about you?
My wife and I are in the midst of moving.
Uh-huh.
So terrible.
Wow.
Moving is just terrible. And
when do you have to be out by again?
Like 4 days. So
no,
we're packing everything up. If I'm sitting in a room that's just like an empty void right now, you know, it's beautifully metaphorical, you know, for a lot that we won't delve into. But I'm ready. I'm ready to be out of here. But just the moving process is on top of quarantine, on top of work, on top of Old Smoky, all covered in snow. So yeah, that's how I'm doing. If you just numerize that, just take some of Sage's decimals and throw it at my face.
Sage, I'm going to hand it over to you to provide a numerical value based on what John just said.
So I'm going to go 5.6139.
Sure.
All right. It's science. It's science, fellas.
Yeah. No, this is math.
Math is a science.
All things are science.
Yeah.
English. I don't know. Whatever. That doesn't make sense.
It's a science of language, a very specific language.
Yeah. Yeah. Cleaning is the science of cleaning. Anyways, this is not a good bit. It's not worth wading into this anymore.
Clean, like the
He's the Bill Nye the Science Guy of cleaning.
So who's the Einstein? The brawny man?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
That's definitely correct. Okay.
Well, what about you, Aaron? What's your ranking?
It's improved, I think. I think I'm at a 7 because slowly things are like gradually opening back up. So like on the very rare occasion with heavy social distancing measures, I've been able to like have a beer somewhere, which is nice. That is nice. However, is it a good idea? I don't know. We'll
find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So improving, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I'd say 7.
Nice.
7. Yeah.
Very good round number.
It is. 7 is divisible by everything. That's also a terrible bit. Anyways, moving on. So before we get started, serious note really quick. If you have not listened to our last episode, very briefly discussing George Floyd and the systemic racism going on, strongly encourage you to check it out. It's far and away the shortest episode of this extended podcast yet, because we believe we're not the ones you should be listening to talk about the crisis that's going on right now. All you can really get from us is that any system that denigrates and oppresses people and dehumanizes people made in God's image is antithetical to the gospel. And there are voices out there who are better equipped to explain it in detail. So if you're still not convinced that there's a systemic problem, join the club. A lot of us are seeing this with new eyes for the first time. And on that episode's description, there are some resources that you can look into, people you can listen to, people you can read up on, and join a protest, hear the voices. It's not a problem that goes away overnight. It takes time. And so, again, that's out there if you want to listen to it. But I think it's worth plugging it and addressing it still. I'm just going to keep doing that for a few more episodes because, in the age of social media, 1 week's problem goes away pretty quick, and that's not what we want to do for this. So again, that was a serious note. We're going to be playing dumb games on this podcast and talking theology as usual, but there's a real problem going on. We can't ignore it. That's all I'm going to say there. So this seems like another time to get some housekeeping out of the way before we get into said dumb games. We're changing a little bit in terms of how this podcast releases. So first of all, good news for those of you who like this total nonsense that we do every other week. We are now making that an every week occurrence. So you will be getting an extended edition every week from now on. Congratulations.
You did it.
Is this what you wanted? Are you happy now? Anyways. So whether you like it or not, you get more of this stuff. We just keep hearing that this is something that you value, so we're going to keep doing more of that. However, in order for us to do that, we have decided to pare back some of the release schedule for the bite-size episodes, which we will still be putting out. But I think we also want to concentrate a lot of our writing efforts on our website and our blog. So if you're still interested in reading some of the things we have to say in sort of a smaller format, please check us out on bitesizetheology.com. Read the blog. You can also, we're also doing a heresy series now. So yeah, follow that. Check us out on there. And here we are. More extended editions. # more extended editions.
That's going to blow up, guaranteed.
Is trending.
Without a doubt.
That's right.
Okay. So here we go. It's time for our opening segment, which this week is a little thing I like to call simple solutions.
Yeah.
Good. I need theme songs for every opening segment. That's a new era. This is a new era of extended editions,
Yes.
everyone.
Let's go.
It's time for theme songs. Okay. So I have 5 of the world's biggest problems. Maybe not biggest, considering the other stuff that's going on. However, the context of this game is that the United Nations has delegated us as a podcast some tasks to solve, some problems to solve. And we will solve them as simply as possible, because why sift through a complicated solution to something that's super easy to fix, So, number 1, first problem, indigestion.
Pepto Bismol. That's like their song, right? Upset stomach, diarrhea, da 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 da. I don't know. I think I went into like the McDonald's special orders don't upset us on that one too. So yeah, I'd say just let's make 1 out of every 3 water fountains dispense Pepto Bismol.
Okay.
Just at random, too.
Is Pepto Bismol the same pink slime that they use to make like chicken nuggets? Like, is that the same thing, or is it like a slightly different variation?
Has chicken nuggets?
It's just the breading.
Has chicken nuggets ever given you indigestion? I think we have our answer.
So is Pepto Bismol causing indigestion?
No, it's solving.
Okay.
So if
Okay.
you have indigestion, you can either go to one of these Pepto Bismol water fountains or get some chicken nugs. Just your choice.
So like there's a water fountain that dispenses Pepto Bismol, and then there's a water fountain that dispenses pink slime.
No,
You
it just
said
shoots chicken nuggets at you.
Oh, that sounds much more appealing.
Yeah, right.
I'd be down for that. Hot summer day, you're on a golf course. Press the button. Here's some chicken nuggets.
Boom. Get blinded.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think this is a question of healthy eating choices. So I think we need to use less mayonnaise, just as a world.
I mean, I completely agree with you.
I disagree. Oh man, no.
So I mean, basically, all I'm saying is
this.
John's furious.
So
We'll
what
never
I'm
get
saying,
him back.
What I'm saying is, when you have your salad, and normally you'd put on a full cup of mayonnaise, if you instead cut it to, I don't know, a fourth cup of mayonnaise, so you still have some mayonnaise on your salad.
Once again, I have to ask the question: are you doing mayonnaise wrong? Like you're doing hot dogs wrong? Are you doing mayonnaise wrong?
So I don't know what you're talking about, John. People,
very, very unpopular.
Are you familiar with salad dressing?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
I love the way you argue. It's like you familiar with salad dressing? My point's proven on mayonnaise.
I have a very strong opinion that mayonnaise, sour cream, and ranch are all the same substance. They're just packaged differently. And it's all evil. Like it's all evil. It needs to be.
Each one is a little
undone.
more watered down than the previous one. And that's the only difference.
You just add more milk, like let it curdle a little bit. How much you let it curdle is what kind of substance you get.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm an expert. Trust our opinion on this.
Reduce mayonnaise consumption by 3/4. So you still get some mayonnaise. But you're healthier because you're eating less mayonnaise.
Yes. Okay. Fully on board.
I'd much rather live in a world that water fountains at random shoot chicken nuggets at my face. I'd choose my world.
If there was a water fountain that dispensed mayonnaise, we would have to do away with this world. Like it would no longer have any redeeming value. Like it'd be Sodom and like just burn the whole thing.
Based on my own biblical study, I'm almost positive that's the reason.
That's right.
That
I
Sodom
think that's
and
it.
Gomorrah was destroyed.
Yeah. Turns
Absolutely.
out Lot was just a vegan.
He was the only vegan in the city.
Yeah.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. We're joking in case we're not telegraphing that enough. Anyways, number 2. Problem number 2.
Hold on. I just love the thought of somebody being like, did you hear those bite-sized theology guys? Yeah, they thought Lot was a vegan, and that's why God took him out. They got some weird theology on that show.
All of it totally true.
Yes.
Number 2. Making beds.
So there are 2 ways we can go about this. So number 1, don't.
Yeah.
If that's the rule, if people just don't make their beds, then it's not a problem because no one makes their beds.
What if you go to bed and you're like a tornado and you just like start pulling all the sheets off and they just like are on the floor when you wake up? Like, what do you do?
I'm
then?
actually
You just live
married to a
without 'em?
tornado. So I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one flaw in the don't scenario. The other one is at the end of every day, and of course this is really good for big sheet and big blanket. So
that's the recurring joke that I love one of the most. Like all these big corporations. Yeah. Big blanket.
So in the morning, you get up. So let's say I get up first and then Jamie gets up. So once Jamie gets up, we throw away all of our sheets and blankets. all of it, we just totally throw it away. And then Big Sheet and Big Blanket have people come around. I'm guessing they're in vans probably. And they come and they make your bed for you while you're gone. So you come back, it's ready. You didn't have to make your bed. It's made for you. Think of the massive job creation that we would have in this economy for people to just go make people's beds. It's unbelievable.
Does your family get its own repository of sheets? Like, or are they throwing all of people's sheets into one big hamper and like running a half-hearted wash?
Well,
Like,
here's
barely
the thing.
remove stains. Yeah.
Here's the thing, Aaron. So when I say throw away your sheets, I mean throw away your sheets. So
okay. So there's no recycling going on.
None at all whatsoever.
So is it a subscription service? Like, how's Big Blanket like making any money off of this? It just seems like a bad investment.
So it's not, because there would be a subscription service. So you would have to subscribe, and we could potentially work it out. You know, put it in, get it in taxes. So this could be a blankets for all type of program potentially, or if not, it could just go by subscription service. So we've got two options depending on what our national legislature decides to do.
So sheets are a utility now. Like, they're there with your water and your electricity. Okay.
Potentially. All depends if we can get it through Congress.
See, I prefer blankets for all who want it.
That's right. If you fall asleep on the couch, is someone going to give you just hand you a blanket?
No.
Or
no, this is exclusively for your bed.
Okay. Gotcha.
I didn't sleep on a sheet until I got married. So just have some pillows and one blanket. You'll be fine.
I think there should be an apparatus around you when you go to sleep. If we can factory, like make factory efficient, like manufacturing, like if you can wrap a Kraft American single like in plastic with a factory, there is no reason you can't have a contraption around your bed that wraps you in a blanket every night. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't.
There will be some early mistakes. People will be swaddled to death, but that's just
that's how invention happens, John.
That's right.
Some people are probably going to die.
You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, John.
That's correct.
I'm sorry. Again, I say don't have a blanket and a pillow. You'll live.
You're asking too much. Robot sounds easier.
My idea is clearly the easiest.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I spoke.
Yeah, you should be. Moving on. Problem number 3. Disappointment.
Low expectations. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than that. If you don't expect much, not much happens, you got what you thought you'd get. But if something awesome happens, you're super happy. So you raise the floor on your emotional well-being when you lower your expectations. You also greatly lower the ceiling, but, whatever.
Just be good at everything all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Then
That's true.
no disappointment.
It's true. You could combine those two solutions. Then you have an even better one. You're always amazed when things just go adequately.
That's right. Those people are called jerks.
All right. I'd say we solved that one. Problem number 4. Landfills.
We're solving that they exist?
Yeah, just what do we do with trash?
So when I was in elementary school, I did a presentation on how to solve the world's pollution, and I was laughed at by my peers. However, 4th grade was rough. However, partially because I couldn't say my R's. Like I said a W whenever I said my R's. So like a girl was a Goyle, and I couldn't say my last name. I was John McCord. And so that probably didn't help the whole presentation aspect of it. My 4th grade teacher must have just thought it was funny. But making me do a public presentation. Anyway, I'm on the rabbit hole. I did a presentation on how to solve pollution, which was the concept that we just take the Earth's trash, we put it in a rocket, and we shoot it towards the sun. Like, what's the downside? There's no downside. I mean, obviously, we'd have to get better at launching things into space. Maybe explore giant catapults or, some sort of teleportation device. Or whenever the astronauts go up, just have them, throw an extra bag in there. But, like, what's the downside? It would burn up before it hit the sun. There'd be gone. It would no longer exist except in some sort of form of matter in space. So, boom, solved. As a fourth grader, I was laughed at.
That might become a reality someday.
Maybe for the first time in Simple Solutions history, I 1000% agree with John.
Yeah.
That is what I was going to say. We live in a time where the SpaceX program has brought space travel back into our lives. This is possible. They built a rocket that went up and didn't explode immediately.
So was fourth grade me, Elon Musk? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if I would have had a kid in fourth grade, I would have named him some sort of random letters and numbers.
Jumble of characters.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait, did you invent a car with unbreakable yet breakable windows? Because if you did, then you're definitely Elon Musk.
Does it look like it came from the N64, the Nintendo 64?
I threw a Matchbox car up towards the sky, and I don't know if it ever came down. So
it probably went into the sun.
Yeah. No, it probably went to orbit. I'm seeing a lot of similarities here.
And then the sun.
Yeah, this is perfect. We have an unbelievable rich narcissist out there who desperately desires to be loved and thought of as a great genius by the world, and this is how he can do it. I'm not going to say his name out loud, even though I said the name of the program that he started. But I mean, it's possible. This is your chance, sir. Fix the trash problem on Earth.
Yeah.
You have the money. You have the capabilities. Do it.
There you go.
Solved. That was
Solved.
Emphatic.
I'm not going to disagree. My initial idea was just set everything on fire. But the sun is made of fire, so that works out great.
Switching to like a real thing real fast. This particular topic is the first time that I've ever had hope for humanity, because apparently they are creating something, and they're in the process of it, called molecule unzipping, which means that it's this essential where you can recycle trash and recycle basically any substance by taking it down to like the molecule level, and then you can use the energy to create something else. So the whole idea is like this circular economy kind of thing where there is no waste, because the waste is going right back into the production cycle of a new thing. So if that actually happens, then like pollution will legitimately be solved, which is awesome. But this could be completely incorrect, but I was like being explained it, and I read a bunch of stuff on it. I don't understand it at all because, I just saw molecule unzipping, and I thought it was a funny phrase. Turns out it's, hopefully the future of humanity.
That's really funny.
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah. Impressive. All right. It is now time for our final one. 2020.
Unsolvable.
Time.
The UN cares about the solution to this problem.
You got to wait it out. There's no other way around this. Although, if there was another way around it, it would be to freeze yourself. But that's it. Those are the two options. Either freeze yourself or don't, and just wait until it's over.
What if we took 2020 put it in a rocket and shot it towards the sun.
I think I'd be okay with that.
I think so too.
Yeah. I would think the United Nations should set up like a warranty service for a year. So like if you don't like it in like 9 months or something, you just give it back. You get a new 2020. We just start from scratch, see what happens. I think that'd be a pretty reasonable thing. Or shooting it into the sun. That's also pretty good.
You know, logistically kind of a nightmare, but philosophically on point.
On point.
This is the UN we're talking about. I don't know if logistics are that important to what
they can do anything
to what they're doing.
Yeah. There we go. We just solved 5 of the world's biggest problems live on this podcast. If you out there listening have any ideas on world problems you'd like us to solve right here, please send those to our email using the contact form on our website, which is at bitesizetheology.com/contact. That is bitesizetheology.com/contact. Please send us your suggestions. Thank you. Okay. It is now time for the main topic. Today's main topic is on Ravi Zacharias, who passed away relatively recently. And for those of you who don't know who Ravi was, he was basically a Christian apologist. Basically he was exceptional at sort of the defense of the faith, which is kind of like what apologetics is. So he would give rationales on why Christianity makes sense and would talk at all kinds of places. And just a really, a person who had an impact on me like a little bit later in my life. Honestly, I didn't come across him until relatively recently. But a person who's been hugely impactful for a lot of people. So we're just going to talk a little bit about him, but more importantly, I think we're going to talk about sort of what he represented, which is the idea that your head and your heart, your mind and your heart are both involved when we talk about your faith in Christ, right? These two things are not like, it's not like blind trust. There's also reasons why we believe what we do, and that God ultimately isn't afraid of your questions. So that is kind of sort of the philosophy that Ravi represented. We have a very similar philosophy on this podcast. And so I'm just going to open it up with a quote of the week from him, where he says, "Unless I understand the cross, I cannot understand why my commitment to what is right must take precedence over what I prefer." So to start, Ravi was a big proponent of the belief that what you believe to be true in your mind and the way that it affects your heart are intrinsically linked, right? So how do you feel that actually is the case for the world at large, and then also like on an individual level, like in your own life? How have you seen that play out to be true?
I think on an individual level, one way I sort of think about this is how I react to worship music in church. So there are songs that have terrific theology that in a certain setting, a specific kind of band or something like that, if you're at a smaller church where there aren't a lot of musically talented people around you, singing these songs, it can sometimes feel like you're being intellectually stimulated, theologically speaking. So you're hitting on the important things of the faith. You're talking about all these important things about who Jesus is. And if sometimes this can happen to me is where, if the music doesn't have that something to sort of give a little energy, it might not connect as well as it could have. And I think the exact opposite thing is even more of a problem. So it's where you have the loud booming music and everything. And what you're singing is, I love you, God. I love you, God. And that's, that's basically all of the theology that's in your song. So like there are these two different sort of extremes that you can go to. for us, like Christianity can be an entirely intellectual exercise if you don't go out and if it doesn't change you, if it doesn't manifest in how you interact with the world. And Christianity can also be something where you're only, fighting for these causes of social justice and feeding the poor, and yet you don't interact with the theology. You don't interact with who God actually is and what God's done. So if just in sort of an individual's life, if the head, the intellect, and the heart, the emotions aren't connected, then that really sort of lowers the ceiling on what you can do and what you can be as a Christian. If those things aren't working together, you're not necessarily growing as much as you could. I might be building up all this theological knowledge, but I'm not doing anything with it. I'm not loving my neighbor like I should. There's also the idea that I could be loving my neighbor well. I could be doing all of these positive things in the community, but I can't adequately explain who Jesus is and what he did. I can't explain to someone how substitutionary atonement works. It's like we can't reach the highest level of whatever Christianity can look like in our lives if those two things are connected. And I think that when I imagine what heaven is going to be like, when I imagine finally being able to worship in a perfect way with God right there before my eyes, the songs that we'll be singing together are going to have all of that. They're going to have everything. We'll have the emotional impact of looking at God and experiencing this where we're next to all of these other people that we know and love, and that, we're sort of all pointed in the same direction in this beautiful way. And I mean, we're just like, the lyrics of whatever we would be singing then would lift up God in the most beautiful possible way, because we're in a place of perfection. So I don't know, at least on the individual level, I just think it's so important. And this is something that Ravi Zacharias did, was focus so much on bringing the head and the heart together, because I think he understood that we become the best possible Christians that we can be when that is the case, when we're not stuck in the stagnant intellectualism or the over the top emotionalism, when we've sort of hit like some sort of happy medium between the two.
Yeah, and I think Ravi Zacharias played like a massive role in my life, but just because I found him at a time when I was rebuilding, and it was so nice to have a voice that was so intelligent but kind. An intelligence that didn't lead to arrogance or snobbery or oftentimes what intelligence leads to. You could tell from his onstage presence, and then having everybody around him and talk about him and the work that he did, the love that overflowed into every action, whether it be in the public eye or not. And he was somebody who you listened to and it was comforting, because I doubt very severely that many people on this planet were as smart as Ravi Zacharias. He was brilliant. I mean, brilliant in a way that you're envious of, because if you gave me a year to give one talk on the level of Ravi Zacharias, I couldn't do it. Like I'd have to memorize so many things. And like in the ministries that he started, it's fascinating to listen to them all talk about how they memorize things and to make their points and to do their apologetics arguments, because you realize the different level of intellect that all of these people are dealing with. And Ravi Zacharias, probably the first among equals with them, where you listen to him and you're comforted, because you're saying he is so much depth and so much intellectual greenery, if that makes sense, where his apologetical arguments and his philosophical arguments and his moral arguments and his existence in his ministry's existence was this kind of blanket of, I don't have to not question, and I don't have to pretend like I understand things I don't, because Ravi Zacharias was this pioneer of asking questions and searching out answers. And the heart and the head are too linked for us to think that we can get by on just one of them, right? If we follow our head too much, we're going to be useless. We're going to be a Pharisee. And if we follow our heart too much, the Bible talks about the heart being wicked and deceitful. So that's going to lead you down a million paths and none of them good. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. When I heard that he had passed away, it was like, I got emotional. And I mean, I never met the man. I never saw him speak never saw him speak at a live event, but just knowing that he was out there doing work was comforting in a weird way. It was just comforting.
Yeah. I think you touch on something interesting, John, where it was like, it felt like he was sort of the, like the way he would have these kinds of conversations with people who had worldviews completely different from his. It was not just his intellect that was the important thing, because I mean, he could have shouted down anybody, you know, but he was incredibly kind. He was relational, and ideally, like, those are the kinds of conversations that we should be having with people that we know, like in our lives, you know, ones that aren't afraid to tell the truth, and yet at the same time are incredibly kind and listening to somebody's concern, and like listening to where they're coming from. What is the question behind the question that they're asking, you know? I think if you think about like connecting the head and the heart, I mean, you see this in all kinds of different ways, and like where things people like kind of believe in their heads and like what their actual experience of the world actually is. Sometimes there's some kind of like implied contradiction in that. Sometimes, like, we live in a very sort of secularized like society where, you know, it's like, it's all about like the self-made individual, right? So like, there's ways to medicate all of our problems away with comforts like, you know, binging Netflix or like keeping ourselves distracted or entertained or whatever. But it's interesting to see something like COVID come through, because what it does is it introduces real pain and discomfort into everyone's lives, and no one has any category for how to deal with that, you know, in the things that they believe in their head. Typically, it's like sort of like we have this sense of, we want to be autonomous. We want to be, you know, individualistic and chart our own course and things like that. But then something like this comes along and you're like, oh, I need other people. Like, why do I feel this way? You know? So like, you see that in the culture, like where people kind of are like wanting to blaze their own trail, but then something like these events that have happened in the news recently sort of come through and realize, oh wait, like, things are not okay. Things are not comfortable. Things are not as easy as I thought they were. And so how do you deal with all of that, right? And so I think like Ravi Zacharias, I think like what he stood for and what he represented with like the head and the heart needing to come together, you know, I think like a lot of the anxiety that we can sometimes feel is because those two things aren't lining up in a lot of ways, like the way that we live our lives and what we actually try and like believe about the world, the ways we want to make it better, like they don't always line up. And Christianity, like for Ravi, like Christianity was, and like for us, you know, Christianity is like deeply enriching and deeply good, and answers a lot of questions that we have. Does it answer every question? No. But it was helpful for me, like in my own life, to hear from somebody who was able to sort of explain, you know, yes, there is a faith aspect to Christianity. There's a heart aspect to Christianity, but it also like just kind of makes sense, like, of the world that we live in for a lot of different reasons. And so for me, it was kind of a battle, like on a daily basis. Like sometimes there's a battle in me between what I know I should be believing as a Christian and sort of a lot of the other narratives that vie for my attention and things that say that they will make me happy, like products or, you know, a great job or a good career or a marriage or something like that, you know. And when I find myself believing those other things make me happy, it totally like affects my heart too. You know, those two things are connected. It makes me feel like not having those things makes me feel inadequate or unloved, you know. And then Ravi is sort of able to like pull all of that back in and say like, no, like here's a reminder of like what actually is true. And for me, that was deeply, deeply helpful for me in a time when I needed to hear it.
And he was such a role model too of one, how to treat people, because you're the points you make, Aaron, of him being smarter. He's smarter than almost anybody he walks in a room with, and he's kind. And on stage, when he gets the questions and he knows that he's got somebody in like a logical fallacy or something, he doesn't pounce on them and embarrass. It's a kind correction. But then there's a story, I can't remember who invited him, but it was either a Mormon school or a Jewish school invited him to talk.
I believe it was a Mormon school. He spoke with like the Mormon assembly.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. He went to the Mormon. He got invited to speak at the Mormon assembly, and he preached on the exclusivity of Christ, which is like a huge theological sticking point between Mormonism and Christianity. And so here you have this situation where he's standing in front of an entirely different faith group, but one that's close enough to where you can draw bridges and give a rah-rah kumbaya, we're all in this together, a High School Musical talk. And he preaches on the exclusivity of Christ. And that is such a brave thing to do. And that's such a challenge, I think, for all of us, is to be bold in our faith in a kind way, in a loving way, like he modeled, and in an intellectual way, like he modeled, but also in a brave, bold way, like he modeled. And it's just such a, obviously he's in a better place and either, gonna hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. There's no doubt in my mind, but selfishly, I'm just mad, honestly, that role model is no longer somebody that's still setting that example. I mean, somebody gave me a great piece of advice though one time when they said, only put your faith in dead men because they can't let you down, saying like, if you're gonna really like invest and study and really lift these people up, at least wait till they die, which is very pessimistic. But I don't know. That's like the only inkling of positivity that I have. I'm just like, I'm going to miss him as a somebody who, I have a question. Someone asked me a question that's ringing around in my head. What I'm going to do, I'm going to Google, their question and Ravi Zacharias, because he's probably going to have a response to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, John, you talked about, sort of you found him at this pivotal point in your life when you're rebuilding your faith. And for me, it was fairly similar. I've talked about this before on the podcast, I'm pretty sure. But shortly after I got saved, I was just voraciously consuming just theology, like I, looking up Matt Chandler and Mark Driscoll, before all the stuff, of course, David Platt stuff on YouTube, and just like building my theology. And obviously I've talked about this before too, is I was a philosophy major. So in this time, this like 2 to 3 year period, I discover Ravi Zacharias, and he just was able to answer these questions that I had, that I heard in class, that in just such a beautiful way. And, you spoke to the bravery of, going to this like mass gathering of Mormons, and it's like the Mormon church, like it's like the Vatican of the Mormon church, basically, is where he went to go preach. And, he also preached all throughout war-torn Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He, spoke in the Middle East, countless times. He spoke in the Soviet Union while the Soviet Union was still in effect. And of course, atheism was the state religion at the time, and they very much looked down on Christianity. Also, sidebar, Joseph Stalin was a seminary student early in his life. So like that's sort of baked into like why he hates religion and why this happens in the Soviet Union. But just this amazing bravery that he had. And I think this feeds into like how he brings the heart into this. So like with the mind, he is an incredible philosophical debater. His logic is, terrific. He's unbelievably articulate, in everything he says. He basically seems to say everything in the best possible way he could have said something. And to see a person who is a Christian do that, when you grow up hearing that Christians are dumb and don't think about stuff and all these things, that's really empowering. But also, it's not just the intellectual academic conversation. There are so many stories that he told, whether they happened to him specifically or people he had talked to, or, they're just stories that he had picked up in his travels all over the world. He just had this ability to not only make you think, but really make you feel. And just tapping into the gospel and just pointing you, like having these stories just, about people surviving as, prisoners of war who, go through these awful things. And the one thing that sort of gets them through is their faith. And it always comes back to not a good guy versus bad guy thing, and one of the specific stories I'm thinking of, but just this shared humanity that we have, and just the reminder that Jesus can and does change people everywhere. All of from any group that you think is the worst possible group. If they're alive, there's a chance that Jesus can save them. And just reminding you of that in these stories. And I mean, I just, all I can really do is just tell you to look him up, he's got a podcast where they continually post old sermons and lectures that he's given throughout the years. I could not recommend that enough. Countless videos on YouTube. It's of all of the speakers and preachers and teachers, he has probably edified me with his teaching. God's done more through his teaching in my life than just about anyone. And I will be forever grateful. And I can't wait to meet him on the other side in glory.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, call it living under a bubble, or living in a bubble, or rather, but it was not until we had actually talked a little bit about him on this podcast that I started diving into it. And that was also around the time that I was going through some serious stuff in my life. And I don't know, like I can see why he has the reverence he does. He is incredibly kind, and also exactly like what you're saying, Sage, where he was able to sort of say all of these things in the way that makes the most sense. And in a time in my life when nothing was making sense, that was an incredibly helpful and securing thing to hear his words and to hear the way that he addressed people. Yeah, fantastic guy. So I guess, like, if you like kind of go back to the topic of the mind and the heart, is there, so I think Ravi kind of represents this idea of balancing the two. This is what like a healthy engagement with apologetics looks like, right? But is there an extent to where if like leaning towards one or the other can become, well, no, I guess my main question is, can there be an overemphasis on apologetics? Like if we lean totally into like absorbing all the teachings and stuff like that, like is there a way that could go wrong? And what does that look like if it's unhealthy?
I mean, if you look on YouTube and type in the word owns, then you'll get an infinite list of results where so-and-so has made a political or theological or point about a movie, or, stuff that doesn't matter and stuff that does matter, where it's just like this person put out an argument that is so airtight that all you can possibly do is agree with it. Even if, it's ridiculous, it doesn't make any sense, whatever. But when we lean too hard into apologetics, we forget the discipleship and the pastoring that goes along with our faith is relationship building. And that's when Christianity is going right, when we're doing it correctly, we are pastoring and leading and living, in close proximity, social distancing right now, but in, spiritual terms, we're close with people and we're developing relationships while also talking about Jesus and discussing theology and trying to come to the most biblical viewpoint we can. If we lean too hard into apologetics, we put that aside. And it seems like this can be the case for some apologists, is the idea that if I win this argument, for some reason you think they're going to be a Christian now, and that's like, our intellect can force the Holy Spirit to move in someone or can force someone to choose Jesus. It's just, it doesn't work like that. I mean, there are certain emotional walls that have to be broken through before the intellectual arguments are going to have any effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the greatest apologist that I've ever met, obviously I never met Ravi Zacharias, but the guy that who taught a class that I was in, photographic memory, good looking guy, just great presence about him, like could make friends with anybody, and like one of the most impressive people I've ever met. And he said, I can win any argument. If you sit me across the table with almost anybody, I can have them by the end of the conversation say Christianity is the most logical choice for a faith system and God probably exists. So I can do that with anybody. So, but I don't like apologetics because apologetics doesn't save anybody. Like his main piece of advice was, if you can lose the argument and or if you can win the argument or win the friend and lose the argument. Mm-hmm. Because a relationship is what's ultimately going to produce any fruit in their life and any fruit in your ministry or any kind of evangelism. But more importantly, just a relationship with them can yield a relationship with Christ. And that has always stuck with me because he would know, again, like it was incredible. The arguments he had memorized, he was the Sunday school all-star, right? He could quote anything. And what he was teaching with passion was that do not try to logically force your will on somebody because it doesn't work. And I personally believe that most unbelief does not come from a place of logic. I think it comes from a place of emotion, a place of hurt, a place of maybe unbelief. But I don't think very many people who claim to logically not believe in God, that if you follow that logic, there's not going to be a logical pathway. That could be a very arrogant statement. I don't mean it to be. But I just think that oftentimes logic doesn't have much to do with it. I think it's spiritual. I think it's emotional. And I think that those two things are beyond and deeper than logic. And so I don't like when we teach that we need to be these apologetic Donkey Kongs, just smashing everything in our way and throwing
theological bananas.
Yeah, theological barrels at people who are trying to climb up ladders. Like it's not how it should be. And even look at Jesus's own ministry. Like he could have owned anybody. Like he spared the theological arguments for the Pharisees and then just sat and talked with people. And I feel like maybe we should model the Son of God. Call me crazy, but our Savior probably set out a really good example more than Donkey Kong.
Yeah, to paraphrase Aaron, you said earlier, Ravi recognize the question behind the question, and that's true. But a thing he always said that I loved was, behind every question is a questioner. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're dealing with the logical sort of all of the things involved with the actual question, but realizing there's someone behind it who has all these hurts and emotions and feelings and thoughts and pains behind it. So even within answering this question about this series of logical statements that result in a conclusion, you're remembering that you're talking to a person. You're not talking to a test booklet in college in your philosophy class. You're talking to a human being who, whether they know it or not, are desperately in need of the Jesus that you're preaching about. And I think that sort of informed it. And I think, and I don't know a ton of apologists, but I imagine that that's probably something that, for the ones who sort of lose track of that's what's happening, is they forget that they're having a conversation ultimately with another human being. And they're like, if I win this argument, people are going to get saved, as opposed to how is this conversation glorifying God?
Yeah. Yeah. I think even speaking from like a personal level, I can't overstate how helpful apologetics was for me, and also how damaging apologetics was for me. Because on one hand, it's such a good thing. I mean, it excited me so much when I was enthusiastic about learning more things about Jesus, right? When I first became a Christian and wanted to know more about him, I swallowed up as much apologetic stuff as I could, read as many books as I could. Tim Keller was one of my favorite people on earth, like his Reason for God book, Making Sense of God, like all amazing books that are just kind of entry-level apologetic stuff, just kind of like getting into it and understanding like the reasons behind why people believe in Christianity. And that sort of changed everything for me from the very get-go. So the problem is the apologetics answers, they don't always feel comfortable in your heart sometimes. And they also don't always reach your heart. Like they can reach your heart, but if you're not actually like trying to do what Jesus's call ultimately was, just go and make disciples, trust me, like I'm with you always to the end of the age. Like I'm here for you. Like if that's not the part that I'm leaning into, then all of my faith is on the apologetics arguments and it's not on Jesus. So for me, of course, I landed in a deconstruction, because for me, it was all about the arguments. For me, it was always about like, I believe this because blank. It wasn't all completely about that, but the emphasis that I put on it, I think, in my early formative years of faith, and also becoming convinced that I was like one of the people who like probably understood the most in a church context or whatever. Like I had all the apologetics arguments figured out. Like that stuff, that thought process and focusing only on the apologetics was the part where in some ways I think it did lead to my deconstruction. But I think that it was also like, it was apologetics done the wrong way, which is I'm going to consume as much information as I can and be comfortable with that. And for me and in my marriage, that was kind of where we were at. It's like, yes, we're trying to like serve here and there in a church context, but the intellectual part of it was getting in the way of us loving people. So like that was kind of where it fell for me. So I've seen like amazing things that apologetics has done in my life. It's made me like come to rest in the truth of who Jesus was. It's come to help me settle in on the things that I really believe and can hang on to and know like this is true about who Jesus was. And then in other ways, it's like the arguing isn't everything. Being able to argue it isn't everything. Trusting Jesus is a whole other concept. And when I block my heart up and don't engage with Jesus with my heart and like try to trust him in things and serve him and actually do what he commands me to do, then I end up in a worse place as a result of it. So I guess for me, like personally, that's where it's manifested itself, like leaning too much into apologetics for me, and making that my whole faith. I think that was like one of the biggest problems I ran into.
Now that's interesting. It's just like, you're so right that it can almost lead down a path of disbelief, if that's what you solely base it on. Because I don't know, just things are clicking for me and things are starting to make sense of why. Like when I first learned apologetics, like it was very useful for me because I had all these like little disbeliefs that just were not dealt with yet, that I just buried deep down. And so like one thing was when in that class we were talking about the historical context and the historicity of the Bible. I was like furious because he was arguing that the Bible is historically accurate. And I had been taught because I was a history major at that time, I'd been taught that how inaccurate the Bible was. And so I was sitting there like furious, just fuming in the back, not knowing why. And it was helpful for me for that apologetics to be smooth, to kind of, but at the same time, we can know a lot about God and not know God. And I think apologetics is, when you learn that, it can, if you don't connect it, just like anything, if you don't connect it, you can just end up knowing a whole lot of trivia about the God of the universe. But if you learn it without ever bringing it to God, if you learn it without ever walking and saying, God, oh my gosh, I just, this is amazing. Then if you don't take it into the stillness, then it doesn't help your faith at all. And it can break down the walls for people, but I don't know. I don't think anybody, I could be very wrong, but I don't think most people's faith begins with understanding, all creation comes from a singular point. Therefore there had to be something before the beginning, like, I don't think that oftentimes leads to people like on their knees being like, Jesus, save me, and I could be wrong. I don't mean to be sounding arrogant, but it's usually a lot more emotional than that.
Yeah. I do think that's what Ravi balanced pretty well.
Yeah.
And not just, trying to tackle a lot of the arguments, but he, like we were saying, there's a questioner behind the question, and just dealing with the emotional part of it too. I think he was exceptional at that, but that's kind of like, I don't know, like you cannot make faith a purely rational exercise, because that's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's just not, there's always going to be a point where you don't know what's coming next, and you have to just trust God to take care of you. And like, there's all kinds of theology you can get that helps you understand who he is and all that stuff. But there are ways that he works that are beyond anything we could possibly wrap our minds around. And so at a certain point, you just have to be able to let go and say, like, I don't know how this works. My experience of this apologetics is very different from what I've always been taught in my head. And it's like finally reaching my heart for the first time. And like, what do I do about that? And like being able to like reach past all of that and know that like there's Jesus on the other end of it. I don't know. For me, I think that's what Ravi underscored. But yeah,
it stinks that he's gone, man. It's just like, just, I don't know. It feels like it's just hitting me now for the first time. Like she had some tears over it when I heard it. And again, I never met the man. It's ridiculous to me, but like how much of an impact you can have if you're just, doing what God calls you to do. Cause for him, his story was that he was saved on a bed of suicide is what they always, and he told God, like, I will serve you, but I will leave no stone unturned, looking for the truth. And, you could almost hear God responding back to that, like, good, like, I'm going to use every bit of it, and it's just so cool to see how much of an impact one person can have on this world, because he had a tremendous impact. And if you haven't heard of him, I mean, I beg you to go on a YouTube rabbit hole, because you will be comforted and you will be smarter. And you will see apologetics done with a heart of love, which is how it should be done.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, that's all I've got, unless anybody has anything else. All right. Well, yeah, look up Ravi. Great resource. Amazing person. And that's awfully hard to segue into email land from, but we're going to try. it is now time for Email Land. For those of you who don't know what Email Land is, let me explain it to you very carefully. And actually, first, if you have any questions at all, like we want to encourage the same spirit of questioning and doubt and exploration of your actual real questions, some uncomfortable questions here on this podcast. So if you want to write us, that's what this segment is for. So please, if you have any questions or you'd like us to try and tackle anything, or maybe you just have something to share or some dumb questions like we're probably about to read, no offense to anybody who submitted them. But like, I just mean like, if you have anything theological to ask us, you can. If there's anything that you want to ask us that is in line with some of the stuff we've been talking about, great. If it's, something that's off topic, like the stuff we're about to read, please feel free to submit that stuff too. We enjoy all of it, and we're about to answer some fun ones now. So somewhere on an island west of the archipelago, several emails have gathered together to form a nation unto their own, and it was called Email Land. You've now entered Email Land. Let's look at what the evil
Oh,
the evil civilians of Email
we haven't
Land.
been here in a while.
Oh, yikes. We haven't, man. Time to
What
come
a
back.
plot twist.
Time to come
They've
back
been
to
evil
Email
the
Land.
whole time.
Oh no. The email civilians of Email Land are up to today. I have 2 emails this week, both from amazing people. Thanks for listening and supporting us in all of the ways that you do. So, first question. This one comes from Cooper. What are your thoughts on the new Tenant movie from Christopher Nolan?
I'm excited. I'm very excited. So, number one, cast looks great.
It does.
I mean, you've got Denzel Washington's son, who was great in that Black Klansman movie. He's a really good actor. You got Robert Pattinson, who post-Twilight has had a pretty solid career.
He's about to be Batman.
He's about to be Batman. He was also in one of the strangest movies I've ever seen about 2 guys in a lighthouse that I don't know if I can recommend it. But if that sounds like a recommendation to you, then I think you should watch it.
Just 2 guys in a lighthouse.
2 guys in a lighthouse. So, number one, cast looks great. Number 2, Christopher Nolan has this ability to both totally confuse me and intrigue me at the same time with his movies. Like Interstellar and Inception, I might not know exactly what's happening and understand the metaphysics of what he's trying to tell me occurs in this universe that he's created. But he writes and directs things in such a way where I'm with him enough for that to not make it an unwatchable experience. So I'm all in. I'm ready for this.
He's never made a bad movie. And until he does, like, I'm gonna watch every movie that he makes until he hits a flop. Like he's hitting he's throwing a perfect game right now.
Yeah.
Have you seen the theories that it might be like a sequel to Inception?
I'd be interested. Okay.
That'd be interesting.
I'm down with that. I like it.
It will be interesting. Yeah. I think the closest to a meh movie he's ever put out is like Interstellar, maybe. I don't know. I kind of liked Interstellar.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just know people have problems with Interstellar.
Oh, okay. I thought Insomnia was it was okay.
Insomnia was okay, but we had
it's a weird cast though.
Creepy Robin Williams, which is always nice.
That was definitely a big plus for sure. But yeah, I'll watch whatever he makes. So I don't even really think I've seen like much of the trailer stuff for Tenet, but I just know it's Christopher Nolan. I'll probably end up watching it at some point.
Yeah, and I'll be amazed and confused, and everybody will be talking about these things, and I'll just nod and smile like I totally understand what they were saying.
Yes, absolutely.
Be like Troy in Community. I didn't understand Inception.
So good. So good. All right. This beautiful email comes to us from one of our most loyal questioners, Cody. Hello, Bite Size family. Your most loyal questioner here, Cody. This week's question might be the toughest I've ever asked. Based on Aaron's Sports Corner, I'm guessing this will be a question more appropriate for Sage and John. What is the difference between a game and a sport, operating under the assumption that the goal of each is to win? I specify this point because some people say games are for fun, but I've never played a game and not tried to win. What is the differentiating factor between a game and a sport? Basketball is a sport, Uno is a game. But why? What about chess, freeze tag, video games, air hockey, dance? The world needs to know.
It's a great question. One that has been debated among lunch tables for generations.
Yeah. And before we get into the minutia, this is one that I think our generation has truly assaulted. It seems like the lines between game and sport have blurred over time.
Yes.
With, the concept of esports, of course, and then there being leagues where people play games, which in theory would make it a sport. So it's a tough question, I think, but I think we've got a conversation here.
The way that we always the working definition for my lunch table in high school was an event where you don't have judges that affect the outcome. So, like, for example, like if a perfect event took place, a referee in football would not affect the outcome, right? He would just manage the game. As opposed to, like, so there's a game, there's a sport, and there's a competition. So competitions are something like diving, where the person dives and judges hold up scorecards or whatever, and that would be a competition but not a sport. However, people didn't like that because they thought we were degrading something like diving, which is very, very difficult. However, different than a game like football or a sport like football. So I don't really know. I think a game is non-threatening. Like, I feel like to be a sport or a competition, you need to be able to break a leg. The
thing that bothers me is the division is not as clear as it should be, because you still call it a football game.
That's true.
Like, it's a sport, but
there is a difference between an athletic event that can be where there's judges scoring something than the players playing themselves. But then that doesn't work for, like, Uno, where there's no referee or judge in Uno, but Uno's not a sport.
So you can call anything a game you want, but sport is exclusive.
I feel like
narrow definition.
I feel like if you can get a concussion, it's a sport. What about that?
Interesting. Where does pushing a hoop with a stick fall?
Probably can't get a concussion in that.
You've never pushed a hoop with a stick.
Well, it seems like that's a singular activity, But, like, so you can't get a concussion playing Uno. You can't get a concussion playing video games. You can get a concussion, like, cheerleading, football, basketball, soccer.
What about Cody's example, freeze tag, though? That's a tough one. That's not a sport. But you could get a concussion playing freeze tag.
You definitely could.
Run into a tree.
Okay. Huh.
There was a time when I would say athleticism. So let's take basketball versus playing a basketball video game as an esport. So what I want to say is that basketball is a sport. So I think we can all agree that basketball is a sport. So esports, that's where it gets interesting, because you can make the argument, well, you're just sitting on a couch, blah, blah, blah. So you can get carpal tunnel and, like, have wrist problems. So there's like a level. It's a very small level of athleticism, let's be real, used in esports, but you can get injured doing it. So it can't be injury. Like, you have to be an athlete to push a hoop with a stick. I mean, the hand-eye coordination that goes into it. So,
but that's why I think concussion is a workable. Like, we need to add something to it. But I think concussion is a solid, because, and don't think that we're hating on esports. Like, Sage and I will wreck you in 2K, but but it's just not a sport.
I got it.
Okay.
There's a lot of, like, I feel like there's just a lot of, like, arrogance, or, like, this is a higher class of activity if we're talking about a sport. I feel like there's like a class system here, and game is at the bottom of the pile. Like anything's a freaking game, whatever. But like football,
so a sport is something. A
Agreed.
sport
I wake up every day in pain because I played a sport.
A sport is something that a rich person in 1915 would be okay with their child doing for a living, whereas a game.
No, because an NFL didn't establish, like, people wouldn't have been okay with that in 1915. Basketball.
Professional sports, though. They had it was a professional sport.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Like, popular opinion was not that it was nice. Like, it was like, have you seen the movie Leatherheads with George Clooney and John Krasinski?
I have.
That explains it pretty well.
Well, I mean, they got George Clooney and John Krasinski to play professional football then, so that's a pretty big draw. But here's my distinction. So you can get a sport is one where you can get a concussion as a byproduct of the regular processes of that event. Whereas a game, to get a concussion playing a game, you have to be really stupid.
Would be out of the norm.
Yes.
That's a good. To get
a concussion playing Uno, I mean, you would have to be very bad, angry that a certain draw didn't go your way. You stand up, hit your head on a lamp, boom, concussion.
But where does like running fall into that category? Is that a sport? It's not a game.
Running is definitely a sport.
But you don't get a concussion through the regular activity of doing it. You don't like run into a freaking branch. Like if you run into a branch, you're doing something wrong.
What if you just like said an injury? Because like running, you could pull a hamstring pretty easily, break an ankle,
So risk of injury?
But at the same time, it's got to be a certain class of injury. So like the reason I went with concussion is because like that's worse than carpal tunnel. So there's got to be like, so what if you said,
because you can also break a finger playing the card game Spoons. So
yeah, that's true.
Injury itself can't predict if it's a sport or game.
What about concussion or hamstring?
Hamstring.
See,
hamstring might be that there might be something there.
I think that's the problem with this debate is that it's just so arbitrary. You can't even come up with criteria. I think we should just merge the words together.
No, it's
and
not
make
arbitrary.
them into one, like spame. We just call them spames.
No, it's
not.
Everyone's
playing a spame.
It's not arbitrary. Like it's one of those words that we know what it means, but I don't know what a sport is, but I know it when I see it.
We're having trouble connecting the head and the heart in this conversation. So right. In my heart, I know that football and basketball are sports.
No, yeah.
Yet my heart wants to say that esports aren't sports. But when we break it down, it's hard to have these like grand general sort of ideas that separate them.
I think it's a working definition. I think a sport is something that you can get a concussion or pull a hamstring in the everyday working of the game or of the actual playing. And a game classified is something where that has to be is an outlier. I think that makes sense. Because like bowling is like not a sport. Who do you think you are? I am guy would disagree.
Are these
I
real
think there
sponsors?
are plenty of people who would disagree that bowling's not a sport. But that's the thing is it's like we have no definition.
I don't know.
It's true.
There's no way to do it.
Is NASCAR a sport?
You can get a concussion.
You can.
By doing it badly.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but that's normal though. Like, what are you talking about? You've been to a NASCAR race? People wreck all the time.
I've
seen plenty of people
race.
not wreck driving. I would argue most people who drive don't wreck. So
NASCAR is a game.
I don't know. I'm happy. I've answered my own question, so I'm happy. Y'all can keep debating, but it's the concussion or hamstring rule.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, John. I think that's definitely an in progress type of deal where we need to keep thinking about it.
We're gonna have to have a sequel to this question, probably.
We're definitely gonna have to
think it through. I'm not
I think
comfortable
we
with
solved
this.
it. I don't know what y'all are talking about. My paradigm has been completely shifted. I now have a definition of it that I can argue. And like, again, there's a 10-year-old who made $1 billion on Fortnite. Congratulations. You were really good at a game. Like,
Okay.
I
Time out. So last thing. So the hamstring rule. In theory, if you played enough kick the can, which is a game, you could probably hurt your hamstring. So let's just say for argument's sake that that's true. Would that then make kicking the can a sport?
no, because it's not in the, like, if you played, I think it should be limited to one game, right? Because you should not pull a hamstring playing one game of kick the can. However, if you play one game of football, you could pull a hamstring or get a concussion. If you compete in a track meet, hamstring concussion. If you run 16 miles like Aaron does for fun, you could probably pull a hamstring, get hit by a car, then concussion. So like, I don't know. I think it's one game, one activity, one playing that you have a decent or a opportunity to get a concussion or pull a hamstring.
Okay, Webster's dictionary defines a sport. And you could, this is the thing, this definition, you could totally call kicking a can a sport. As long as there's people around to watch it and they're having a good time, that's basically it. It's an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So you could kick a can and people are watching you. I mean, that's physical exertion. Get that heart rate pumping.
So if we Twitch streamed us playing Rocket League and and at least one person watched it,
Would it be a sport?
that's a sport, according to Webster.
Interesting. That might be a foreshadow.
Thanks, millennials. This is your fault.
Let's switch to spame. I'm going to petition for that. Okay.
Yeah. We solved it. Concussion hamstring. It's the concussion hamstring rule.
I don't think we've landed on any conclusive answer whatsoever.
Okay, last thing. Maybe if it's possible to get both a concussion and pull a hamstring at the same time in the activity.
No. That makes it harder.
At the same time?
Yeah, if it's possible.
At all possible. Like you could get like if you're playing a video game, you could like
sneeze.
A dog could come out a rabid dog could come out from underneath your couch cushions and tear your hamstring up, and then your ceiling falls on your head, so you have a concussion. It's still possible.
I like our first definition.
Unlikely.
It's not done yet, but it's
we'll work on it.
It's
work in progress.
Percolate.
We're getting there.
Yeah. We'll pray about it. All right, everyone. I'm sorry you had to hear that. To anyone out there listening, please write us. We would like to hear from you. Again, could be related to theology, could be related to personal stuff, could be whatever you want it to be, like whether a game is a game or a sport is a game or vice versa, or a sport is a game or a
I feel like an Inception. How many levels are we in?
It's hard to say. Tenant will make you feel like you're trying to figure out what a game is or a sport is. That's like what his goal probably is. What if that's what the movie's about? Anyways.
Just answer that question.
I'm still in.
I'm in. Thank you all for listening. You can follow us at Bite Theology on Twitter. You can check us out on Instagram at Bite Size Theology. You can also find us on Facebook at Bite Space Size Space Theology. But also check out our website because we're going to be doing some writing on there more often than we usually do. So bitesizetheology.com/blog, bitesizetheology.com/contact, okay. All right. That's enough. Goodbye, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the next one.